The transport shuttle docked with a heavy clang that echoed through the metal corridors. Martinez grabbed his single bag and stepped onto the Galactic Preserve Station for the first time. The facility was massive, stretching out in all directions like a small city floating in space. Through the viewport, he could see the planet Prime spinning slowly below, its surface covered in swirling purple clouds. A tall, thin alien waited near the airlock. Its skin was pale blue, and its eyes were positioned on the sides of its head like a prey animal. It wore a formal uniform with badges didn't recognize. "You are the human," the alien said. Its voice came from a translator device on its chest. "I am Station Director, follow me." Followed through the winding corridors. Other aliens stopped to stare at him. Some pointed. Others whispered to each other in languages the translator couldn't pick up, was used to it by now. Humans were new to the galactic community, and most species still saw Earth as a dangerous backwater planet full of crazy creatures who somehow survived against all odds. They passed viewing windows that showed different habitats. In one, massive six-legged creatures grazed on purple vegetation. In another, something that looked like a floating jellyfish drifted through a tank of thick liquid. Each habitat was carefully maintained to match the home planet of whatever lived inside. "You will work in the Apex Predator Wing," said without looking back. "Your supervisor he will explain your duties." They entered a section of the station where the lighting was dimmer and the walls were thicker. Could feel the difference immediately. This was where they kept the dangerous animals, the ones that could kill. Was waiting in the observation room. He was covered in gray scales with 4 arms and a ridge of bone running down his spine. He looked up and down with obvious disapproval. "Another human," said. "I requested an experienced handler. They sent me someone from a planet that only joined the community 3 years ago." "I have 8 years of experience working with large predators on Earth," said calmly. "I specialized in rehabilitation of traumatized animals." "Earth predators," said with a dismissive wave of one hand. "Your largest carnivore weighs less than most species we house here, but you are here now, so I will show you what real danger looks like." Led down a long corridor. The doors they passed were reinforced with triple layers of metal and energy barriers. Each one had warning signs in multiple languages. His translator helpfully informed him that most of them said variations of extreme danger and authorized personnel only. They stopped at the last door. The warning signs here were bigger and brighter than all the others. "We acquired this specimen 6 months ago," explained. "It is from the desert world of. The species is classified as apex predator with near-sentient intelligence. This individual was captured by illegal poachers who killed its family unit. We rescued it from a black market facility." "How has it adapted to captivity?" asked. Made a sound that might have been laughter. "It has not adapted. It has injured 4 handlers. It destroyed 3 different containment upgrades. It refuses all food unless we throw it into the habitat from a distance. The creature is starving itself to death." "What's the plan for rehabilitation?" "There is no plan," said bluntly. "The Council is considering euthanasia. It would be more humane than watching it waste away." Felt his chest tighten. "Can I see it?" Pressed a button and a viewing port opened in the wall. Stepped up to the reinforced glass and looked inside. The habitat was large but barren. Sand covered the floor and a few rocks were scattered around, but there was little else. In the far corner, pressed against the wall, was It was enormous, at least 12 feet tall, even in its crouched position. Its body was covered in armored scales that shifted from deep red to burning orange as it breathed. It had 6 powerful limbs, each ending in claws as long as forearm. Around its neck and down its spine was a mane of crystalline spines that caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the sand. But what struck most were the eyes. They were bright amber and they were intelligent. The creature wasn't looking at them with animal instinct. It was watching them, studying them, calculating. "It positions itself there because it has the best view of both entry points," said quietly. "It's not hiding, it's maintaining tactical advantage." "It is a killing machine," said, "nothing more." Watched for a long moment. Its breathing was slow and controlled. Its spines vibrated slightly, creating a low hum that could feel in his chest even through the reinforced wall. Every few seconds, its eyes would track across the room, checking exits, looking for threats. "It's terrified," said. "It has killed or injured everything that has entered its habitat," replied. I do not think fear is the issue. Look at the posture, insisted. The defensive positioning, the constant vigilance. This is a traumatized animal. It watched its family die. Then it was locked in cages and transported across space to a completely alien environment. It doesn't trust anyone because everyone it trusted is dead. Crossed two of his forearms. And what do you suggest? That we simply ask it nicely to cooperate? Continued watching as he stared, the creature's eyes locked onto his. For a long moment, human and alien regarded each other through the glass, saw pain in those amber eyes, loss, anger, but also intelligence and awareness. I want to be its primary handler, said. The observation room went silent. Stared at like he had announced his intention to jump out an airlock. That is not possible, finally said. The creature is too dangerous. We do not send handlers into the habitat anymore. It is too great a risk. Then it will die, said simply. Animals like this don't recover through neglect. It needs interaction. It needs to learn that not everything here wants to hurt it. It will kill you, said flatly. Maybe, admitted. But I've worked with traumatized predators before. I know the risks, and I know that what you're doing now isn't working. Turned to who had been standing silently near the door. Director, I formally object to this plan. It is reckless and will result in the human's death. Studied for a long moment. Her large eyes blinked slowly. The human species has a reputation for reckless behavior, she said, but also for succeeding where others believe success is impossible. I will allow this, but only under strict protocols. Martinez, you will have 2 months to show progress. If the creature does not improve, or if you are injured, the program ends immediately. Understood, said. Shook his head. This is madness. Only a foolish human would attempt to tame something like that. Turned back to the viewing port, that was still watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. Its spines created a low, rumbling vibration that sounded almost like a question. Then I guess I'm a fool, said quietly. That night sat in his small quarters reviewing everything the station had on biology and behavior. The files were limited. The species came from a harsh desert planet where temperatures could swing 100 degrees between day and night. They were ambush predators who hunted in family units. They communicated through a complex system of vibrations created by their crystalline spines, supplemented by scent marking and body language. What interested most was a note buried in the behavioral section, formed deep emotional bonds with their family groups. They mourned their dead. They protected their young with suicidal determination. In the wild, a separated from its family would sometimes refuse to eat, dying slowly of grief. Looked at the image on his screen, the same from the habitat captured in better lighting. Its scales gleamed like polished metal. Its spines caught the light like gems. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. You're not a monster, said to the image. You're just hurting. He shut down the screen and lay back on his bunk. Tomorrow, he would begin the impossible task of arrived at the habitat at exactly 600 station time. He carried a small chair, a data pad, and a container of his breakfast. Was already there, along with 2 security officers who looked ready to pull out at the first sign of trouble. You are really going through with this, said. It wasn't a question. I am, replied. He set up his chair outside the viewing port in clear sight of the inside. The creature was in its usual corner, watching him with those sharp amber eyes. Sat down, pulled out his breakfast, and started eating. Waited for several minutes. When made no move to enter the habitat, this confusion was obvious. What are you doing? Asked. Eating breakfast, said around a mouthful of protein bar. I mean, when do you plan to begin the rehabilitation work? I already started, said. He took another bite and chewed slowly. Inside the habitat, that tilted its massive head, clearly confused by this strange human who was just sitting there doing nothing. Made an exasperated sound and left. The security officers remained, but they looked equally baffled. Spent 4 hours outside that viewing port. He ate his meals. He read reports on his data pad. He occasionally made notes. And every so often he would look up at and speak in a calm, quiet voice. Good morning, he would say. My name is, I know you're scared. I know you don't trust anyone here. That's okay. I'm not going to rush you. The never responded. It just watched him with unblinking focus. This became routine. Every day he would arrive at 600 and sit outside the habitat for 4 to 6 hours. He never tried to enter. He never made threatening moves. He just existed in the space, predictable and calm. The other handlers thought he was wasting time. Filed a formal complaint after the first week, arguing that methods showed no results and violated standard protocols, but reviewed the security footage and made an interesting observation. The creature has not attempted to breach containment since the human began his routine, she noted. Previously, it would charge the barriers at least twice per day. Now it simply watches him. Had no response to that. Spent his evenings studying. He learned everything he could about communication. The crystalline spines on their bodies could vibrate at different frequencies, creating sounds that ranged from low rumbles to high-pitched singing. Each frequency had meaning. Low rumbles meant aggression or warning. Medium tones indicated curiosity or attention. High musical notes were associated with contentment or bonding. He also learned that had excellent hearing, far better than humans. They could detect vibrations through the ground and air that most species would miss completely. On his 10th day, brought something new to his routine. He carried a small, portable speaker that he placed on the floor near the viewing port. Inside the habitat, this attention immediately focused on the device. Played a low-frequency tone, barely audible to his own ears. The spines began to vibrate in response, creating a resonance that could feel through the floor. The creature stood up for the first time since had been watching it, moving closer to the barrier. Changed the frequency, making it slightly higher. The spines adjusted, matching the new tone. It was communication, basic and simple but real. Watched this exchange from the observation room above. Even he had to admit it was progress. 2 weeks into the program, decided it was time to take the next step. He informed that he would be entering the outer section of the habitat, a transitional space separated from the main area by reinforced barriers. Absolutely not, said immediately. The protocols forbid direct contact at this stage. The protocols were written for handlers who were trying to dominate and control, said. I'm trying to communicate. There's a difference. Approved the request over objections, but she insisted on maximum security presence. When entered the outer section, 6 security officers stood ready with tranquilizer systems and emergency extraction equipment. Stepped through the airlock and into the outer enclosure. It was small, maybe 20 feet square, with transparent barriers on one side that looked into the main habitat. There was on the other side of those barriers watching him. For a long moment nothing happened, stood still, keeping his hands visible and his posture relaxed. The watched him with intense focus. Then it moved. The creature charged the barrier with terrifying speed. One moment it was standing still, the next it was a blur of red scales and flashing claws. It hit the barrier with enough force to crack the outer layer, creating a spider web pattern in the reinforced material. Alarms immediately started blaring throughout the station. The security team moved to evacuate, but he raised his hand to stop them. His heart was pounding and his hands were shaking, but he didn't run. He stood his ground, keeping his eyes on the creature pulled back for another charge. Its spines were vibrating at a high, harsh frequency that's translator interpreted as a threat display. It was showing him what it could do. It was warning him to leave. Pulled out his portable speaker and played a specific tone. It was a low, steady frequency that he had noticed seemed to calm the creature during their previous sessions. The stopped mid-charge. Its massive body froze, claws extended, mouth open to show rows of sharp teeth, but it didn't complete the attack. Kept playing the tone. He started speaking in the same calm voice he had used for 2 weeks. I know you're angry, he said quietly. I know you want me gone, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to help. The spines shifted, their vibration changing from harsh threat to something more complex. Confusion, maybe, or curiosity. Slowly, carefully, took a step backward toward the airlock. Then another. The watched but didn't charge again. Made it to the exit and stepped through, and only then did he allow himself to breathe properly. Was furious. You could have been killed. The barrier was damaged. This proves the creature is too dangerous. But saw something different in the security footage when he reviewed it later. The had charged, yes, but it had stopped. It had listened to the tone. It had chosen not to complete the attack. That was communication, that was choice, that was progress. Over the following weeks, continued entering the outer enclosure daily. Each time, this response was less aggressive. It stopped charging the barrier. It began approaching slowly instead, investigating this strange human who kept invading its space but never tried to hurt it. Started bringing food into the outer enclosure. He would place it near the barrier and then retreat to the far side. The wouldn't take it while was close, but the moment he moved away, it would snatch the food through the feeding slot and retreat to its corner. Progress was slow, measured in inches rather than miles, but it was real. One day, sat down on the floor of the outer enclosure, just a few feet from the barrier. They approached on the other side, close enough that could see the individual scales on its body, and the way its spines caught the light. They sat like that for an hour, human and alien, separated by transparent metal, but connected by something neither of them fully understood yet. Played different frequencies through his speaker, and the spines would respond, creating harmonies and resonances. It was like learning a new language, one word at a time. When finally left that day, he noticed something he had never seen before. They followed him to the barrier and stayed there, watching him go. Its spines were creating a soft, almost musical tone. That night made a note in his log. Subject is beginning to seek interaction rather than avoid it. Positive reinforcement through predictable routine and species-appropriate communication appears effective. Recommend continuing current protocols. Read the report and grudgingly admitted that approach was showing results. Though was eating regularly now, it was moving around its habitat more. The constant aggressive displays had stopped. But everyone on the station knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when tried to enter the main habitat, when there would be no barrier between him and 12 feet of apex predator. Called to her office at the end of his 4th week. "Your progress has been noted," she said. "The council is impressed, however they have concerns about the next phase. Entering the main habitat represents significant risk." "I know," said, "but it's necessary. The creature needs more than communication through a barrier. It needs to learn that it can share space with someone without violence." "And if it attacks you?" Had thought about this question many times. "Then we'll know I was wrong, but I don't think I am. Everything I've seen tells me this creature is capable of trust. It just needs a reason to give it." Studied him with those large alien eyes. "Humans are strange," she said finally. "You choose hope even when logic suggests despair. It is both your greatest strength and your most dangerous weakness." The day entered the main habitat. Half the station watched through the monitoring systems. Had insisted on full security protocols, and medical teams stood ready in case something went wrong. Paced in the observation room, clearly expecting disaster. Stood in the airlock, taking slow breaths to calm his racing heart. Through the transparent door, he could see the watching him from the center of the habitat. The creature had positioned itself between and the far exit, a clear dominance display. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, stepped through. The habitat felt different from inside. Bigger. The ceiling stretched high above, designed to accommodate this full height. The sand under his feet was warm, heated to match the desert temperatures of the creature's home world. The air was dry and hot, making each breath feel like it scraped his throat. They didn't move immediately. It stood perfectly still, watching with those intelligent amber eyes. Its spines created a low, rumbling vibration that felt in his bones. Not quite a threat, but definitely a warning. Sat down cross-legged on the sand, making himself smaller and less threatening. He placed his portable speaker beside him and pulled out a canteen of water. He took a slow drink, his movements careful and deliberate. They circled him slowly, staying about 15 feet away. Its massive body moved with surprising grace for something so large. Each step was precise, calculated. It was testing him, trying to understand this strange creature that had invaded its space. Sat still, he didn't try to touch he didn't make sudden movements. He just existed in the space, calm and unthreatening. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. In the observation room was incredulous. What is he doing, just sitting there? He is communicating without words, observed. He is showing the creature that he means no harm, that he can share space without dominance or violence. They continued its slow circling. Sometimes it would come closer, near enough that could smell its scent, like hot metal and desert sand. Sometimes it would retreat to the far side of the habitat, watching from a distance. Occasionally spoke in low, quiet tones. He played gentle frequencies through his speaker, but mostly he just waited. Finally, after nearly 4 hours, they settled down at the far end of the habitat. It didn't block the exit anymore. It maintained visual contact with, but its posture had shifted from aggressive to merely watchful. It was a compromise, an acknowledgement that was allowed to be there. Stood slowly, his legs cramping from sitting so long. This attention sharpened, but it didn't rise or move to block him. Walked to the airlock, his movements calm and steady. The watched him go but made no attempt to attack. As the airlock sealed behind him, allowed himself a small smile. They had crossed a crucial threshold. Over the next 3 weeks, spent increasing amounts of time in the main habitat. He brought enrichment items with him, things designed to make the space more like this natural environment. Large boulders for climbing, additional heat lamps to create temperature gradients, even special sand imported from a desert planet with similar mineral composition too. The watched with obvious interest as its environment transformed. It would wait until left, then investigate the new additions, rubbing against them, testing them with its claws. Also noticed the creature's behavior changing in other ways. Its spines produced more varied sounds now, not just warnings and threats. Sometimes they would create almost musical tones, especially in the early morning when the heat lamps first activated. They began approaching more readily. It would come within a few feet and settle down, watching him work. Would talk to it constantly, explaining what he was doing, even though he knew it couldn't understand his words. But tone mattered and presence mattered, and slowly, trust was building. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Was installing a new climbing structure, a framework of metal beams designed to mimic the rock formations found on. He was balanced on a temporary ladder, securing one of the upper connections, when his foot slipped on the sandy ground below. He fell hard, twisting his ankle as he hit the ground. Pain shot up his leg, sharp and immediate. He couldn't stop the grunt of discomfort that escaped his throat. Though was on the other side of the habitat, but it moved the instant fell. It crossed the space in seconds, its powerful limbs carrying it forward with frightening speed. Froze, this was it. He was injured, vulnerable, and a massive predator was charging straight at him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to call for help, but he forced himself to stay still. The stopped a few feet away, towering over him, could see every detail of its body from this angle, the way its scales overlapped like armor, the crystalline spines that glowed with internal light, the triple row of sharp teeth visible behind its partially open mouth. One swipe of those claws could end him, one bite could crush his skull. But they didn't attack. Instead, it lowered its massive head, bringing its face close to us. Its nostrils flared as it scented him, detecting the pain chemicals his body was releasing. Its spines began to vibrate, creating a sound had never heard before. It was soft, almost gentle, a low, resonant hum that seemed to wrap around like a blanket. There was no aggression in it, no threat. If didn't know better, he would say it sounded like concern. The settled down beside him, close enough that could feel the heat radiating from its armored body. It positioned itself between and the door, but not in an aggressive way, more like it was guarding him. Sankle throbbed with pain, but he managed to speak. "It's okay," he said softly. "I just need to get to the medical bay." This head tilted, those amber eyes fixed on his face. Its spines continued their gentle humming. Slowly, carefully, tried to stand. The pain made him gasp, but he managed to get upright, keeping his weight off the injured ankle. The rose with him, moving in perfect synchronization like it was trying to help. Limped toward the airlock. Every step was agony, but he focused on moving steadily, not showing fear. The followed at a distance of about 3 feet, matching his pace. Its posture was protective, alert, watching everything around them even though they were alone in the habitat. When reached the airlock, he turned back to look at the one more time. The creature was sitting now, its spines still creating that soft, concerned sound. "Thank you," said quietly. The airlock sealed behind him, and the medical team rushed forward to help him to the medical bay. His ankle was sprained, not broken, but it would need rest and treatment. Arrived at the medical bay within minutes, his expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "This proves my point," he said. "The creature is too dangerous. You were injured." "I was injured by my own clumsiness," corrected, wincing as the medical officer wrapped his ankle. "That had nothing to do with it. In fact, it showed restraint and what appeared to be empathy." "Empathy," repeated skeptically. "It is an animal." "It's an intelligent being," said firmly. And today it chose not to attack when I was completely vulnerable. It could have killed me easily. Instead, it stayed with me. It protected me. Entered the medical bay, having reviewed the security footage. The human is correct, she said. The creature's behavior showed clear signs of concern and protective instinct. This is unprecedented. Wanted to suspend the program immediately, but overruled him. She authorized to continue once his ankle healed, and she approved his request for additional enrichment resources. The footage of the incident spread throughout the station. Other handlers started watching sessions with new interest. Scientists from different departments requested access to his notes. The impossible was becoming possible, and everyone wanted to understand how. Spent the next week recovering, but he visited the habitat every day. He couldn't go inside yet, but he would sit outside the viewing port with his ankle elevated, just like he had in those first weeks. They would come to the barrier and settle down on the other side. Its spines would create soft, musical tones. Sometimes would play frequencies through his speaker, and they would create harmonies together, human and alien making music across the barrier. Other staff members who passed by would stop and watch in amazement. The creature that had been classified as untamable, that had injured multiple handlers and destroyed containment systems, was now sitting peacefully with a human, creating something beautiful. On the 8th day of recovery, his ankle was healed enough for him to return to the habitat. He stood at the airlock, looking through the transparent door at the waiting inside. The creature's spines were vibrating with what it learned to recognize as anticipation. It had missed him. This massive, terrifying predator from a harsh desert world had actually missed the human who spent time in its space. Entered the habitat and immediately noticed something new. In the corner where he usually worked, they had arranged several objects. A training drone that the creature was supposed to hunt for enrichment. A piece of the climbing structure that had broken off. A smooth rock from the habitat floor. They were gifts that was bringing offerings the way a wild predator might bring food to a family member. Felt his throat tighten with emotion. This was more than tolerance, more than acceptance. This was the beginning of a real bond. He walked to the corner and sat down among the gifts. They approached and settled beside him, close enough that their bodies were almost touching. Its spines created a gentle, contented hum. 3 months after first entered the main habitat, the relationship between human and had evolved into something that fascinated scientists across the galaxy. Had developed a working communication system based on the creature's natural vibration language, combined with body language and consistent routines. He learned that which he had privately started calling Ember because of her red-orange coloring, had distinct preferences. She liked fine sand better than coarse sand. She preferred her heat lamps at specific intensities during different times of the day. She was fascinated by running water, something rare on her desert home world, and would spend hours watching the small fountain had installed in the habitat. Even more remarkable, Ember had started initiating positive interactions. When entered the habitat each morning, she would approach him immediately, her spines creating a welcoming frequency that he had learned meant greeting or happiness. She would walk beside him as he did his maintenance work, sometimes placing her massive head against his shoulder in what appeared to be affection. She brought him gifts almost daily. Dead training drones she was supposed to hunt for enrichment. Interesting rocks she found in the sand. Once she brought him a piece of crystalline material that had broken off from her own spines, which understood was incredibly significant. In culture, sharing spine fragments was a sign of deep family bonds. The station staff's attitude had shifted completely. Scientists from across the galactic community requested visits to observe work. He gave presentations on his methods, emphasizing patience, respect for the species' natural behavior, and the importance of addressing trauma. But not everyone was pleased with the program's success. A high-ranking member of the Galactic Wildlife Conservation Council arrived at the station with little warning. He was a species known for rigid adherence to traditional methods and distrust of innovation. He brought with him 3 security specialists and an attitude of deep skepticism. "I am here to evaluate this program," announced when he met with and the council has concerns about safety protocols and the precedent being set. "The program has been completely successful," replied. "The creature is healthy, active, and shows no signs of aggression." "The creature is a wild predator," said coldly. "This human has created a dangerous illusion of control. He has anthropomorphized a killer, attributing emotions and intentions that do not exist. Felt his temper rising but kept his voice calm. With respect, sir, they are known to have complex emotional lives. They form family bonds, they mourn their dead, and they are capable of trust. I haven't anthropomorphized Ember. I've simply recognized what she already is. Ember repeated with obvious distaste. You have named it. This proves my point. You have formed an inappropriate attachment to a specimen that could kill you at any moment. She has had many opportunities to kill me, said. She has chosen not to. That's trust, not luck. Turn 2. I am scheduling a formal evaluation. I want to see this supposed control demonstrated under controlled conditions. The evaluation was scheduled for 3 days later. Spent those days feeling increasingly uneasy. His attitude suggested he wasn't looking for evidence of success, but rather for evidence of failure. On the day of the evaluation, arrived with his security team and a portable alarm system. Noticed immediately and objected. Loud noises will distress Ember, he explained. She's been making excellent progress, but sudden jarring sounds could trigger her trauma response. If the creature is truly rehabilitated, it should be able to handle normal environmental stimuli, replied dismissively. We will proceed as planned. Appealed to, but she was bound by council protocols. The evaluation would proceed. Entered the habitat with a sick feeling in his stomach. Ember approached him as usual, her spines creating happy greeting tones. She pressed her head against his chest in their normal morning ritual. I'm sorry, girl, whispered, running his hand along her armored neck. This isn't going to be a good day. The evaluation began simply enough. Asked to demonstrate basic interaction, which he did easily. Ember followed directions, moved to different areas of the habitat when asked, and showed no signs of aggression. But could see wasn't satisfied. They wanted to see a failure. Then produced a remote control. I want to see how the creature responds to unexpected stimuli, he announced. Don't, said urgently. Please, sir, that's not necessary. Ignored him and pressed the button. The alarm system activated with a piercing shriek that echoed through the habitat. The sound was loud, harsh, and completely unexpected. Saw Ember's entire body go rigid with shock. Her spines began vibrating at a frequency had never heard before, high and discordant. Her pupils dilated. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She was having a panic attack. Turn it off, shouted over the noise, but kept the alarm running. Ember's trauma resurfaced in an instant. She was no longer in the safe habitat she was back in the cage where poachers had kept her. She was watching her family die again. She attacked the viewing barrier with terrifying violence, her massive body slamming into the reinforced material with enough force to crack it. Her claws tore at the metal. Her spines created sounds like screaming. Enough, commanded, but the damage was done. Deactivated the alarm and turned to the assembled observers. You see, the creature is unstable and dangerous. This program has failed. I am ordering the specimen to be sedated and transferred to a maximum security facility immediately. Security teams rushed to prepare knockout gas canisters. Medical staff stood ready to treat if he was injured during the extraction. Watched Ember's panicked rampage through the viewing port. She was destroying everything in the habitat, tearing apart the enrichment items he had carefully installed, attacking anything that moved or made sound. But he saw past the violence to the terror underneath. She was terrified. She was reliving the worst moments of her life, and it was fault for allowing to proceed with the evaluation. He made a decision that would either save everything or end in his death. Moved to the airlock before anyone could stop him, shouted a warning but was already cycling through. The door opened, and he stepped into the habitat. Ember was on the far side, still attacking the barriers, still lost in her trauma. Walked toward her slowly, his hands visible, his posture calm despite his racing heart. Ember, he called out. His voice was barely audible over the sounds of her rampage. Ember, it's me, it's... She didn't hear him. She wheeled around and charged, her eyes wild with fear and rage. Those massive claws extended, that huge mouth open to show rows of deadly teeth. Stood his ground. He pulled out his portable speaker and played the frequency he knew calmed her, the gentle vibration they had used from the very beginning. Ember was 3 feet away when she skidded to a stop, sand spraying everywhere. Her momentum carried her forward, and for one terrible moment, her claws were inches from his chest. But she didn't complete the attack. Stepped forward and placed both hands on her armored chest, right over where her 3 hearts beat in rapid, terrified rhythm. He could feel them pounding like drums. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're safe, I'm here." Ember's entire body was trembling. Her breathing was ragged and desperate. But slowly, impossibly, her spines began to shift frequency, moving from that terrible screaming sound to something softer. Kept talking, kept playing the calming tones, kept his hands on her chest so she could feel his presence. He sang a simple melody, something his mother had sung to him when he was afraid as a child. Ember's breathing began to slow. Her heart stopped racing quite so fast. The trembling in her body gradually subsided. She lowered herself to the ground and went down with her, keeping contact the entire time. She pressed her massive head against his chest, her spines creating a sound like crying. Wrapped his arms around her neck as much as he could. "I know," he whispered. "I know it was scary, but you're safe now, you're safe." The entire station watched in silence. Security teams lowered their weapons. Medical staff stood frozen in shock, even had gone quiet. For 20 minutes, sat on the sand with Ember pressed against him, her breathing gradually returning to normal, her spines creating softer and softer sounds until they were almost peaceful again. Finally, she pulled back and looked at with those amber eyes. There was still fear there, but also recognition, trust. She knew him even through the panic. She had chosen not to hurt him. Stood slowly, his legs shaking from adrenaline. Ember stood with him, staying close, her body language protective. He walked to the airlock with Ember following. When he reached the door, he turned back to her one more time. "I won't let them take you," he said. "I promise." The airlock sealed behind him and found himself surrounded by stunned staff members. Pushed through the crowd, her expression unreadable. "That was the most foolish and brave thing I have ever witnessed," she said finally. Stepped forward, his face rigid with anger. "This changes nothing. The creature is dangerous. The transfer order stands." "No," said firmly. "It does not. What I just witnessed was not a failure of rehabilitation. It was a demonstration of the bond between intelligent beings. The creature had every opportunity to kill Martinez. It chose not to because it trusts him, even in the midst of trauma that you deliberately triggered." She turned to with clear anger. "You violated safety protocols by introducing that alarm system. You deliberately caused distress to a traumatized animal. I am filing a formal complaint with the council about your conduct." Security team escorted him off the station that same day. His complaint about the program was dismissed, and an investigation into his methods was launched. Spent the rest of that day in the habitat with Ember, helping her calm down completely, rebuilding her sense of safety. They sat together in the sand and played gentle frequencies while Ember's spines created harmonies in response. That night, the video of entering the habitat during Ember's panic spread across the galactic community. Millions of beings watched a human calm a 12-foot predator through nothing but trust and patience. The aftermath of failed evaluation changed everything. Within days, the Galactic Wildlife Conservation Council issued new guidelines for handling traumatized predators, based entirely on methods. The incident became a case study in programs across the galaxy, teaching future handlers that patience and understanding achieved more than force ever could. Received offers from prestigious research institutions, invitations to speak at conferences, and requests for consultation from facilities dealing with difficult cases. But he turned most of them down. His focus remained on Ember and on expanding the rehabilitation program at the station. Officially promoted to director of the new behavioral rehabilitation program. His first action was to establish protocols for other handlers to work with Ember, teaching them the vibration language and behavioral cues he had spent months learning. The first handler he trained was a young named who had always been fascinated by work. Spent 2 weeks teaching everything he knew, emphasizing that success came from respecting the animal's intelligence and emotional needs. The day entered Ember's habitat for the first time, watched from the observation room with beside him. Nervous, asked. Terrified, admitted. If something goes wrong, it proves that my methods only work for me. But nothing went wrong. Ember approached cautiously, her spines creating questioning tones. responded with the proper frequencies, moved with the calm confidence had taught, and within an hour, Ember had accepted the new handler's presence. Felt relief wash over him. It wasn't just about him. The methods worked because they were based on understanding, not on some special bond only he could create. Over the next months, 3 more handlers successfully worked with Ember. She maintained her strongest bond with, greeting him with special enthusiasm whenever he entered the habitat, but she no longer depended solely on him for social interaction. The program expanded rapidly. Other facilities transferred their most difficult cases to the station, creatures that had been classified as hopeless. A pack predator that had killed 3 handlers at its previous facility learned to trust again once team rebuilt its social structure properly. A serpent that had been driven to madness by isolation recovered when given appropriate environmental enrichment and companionship. Each success reinforced the core principle had proven with Ember. Most creatures labeled as dangerous or untamable were simply traumatized, misunderstood, or kept in conditions that violated their basic needs. 6 months after the evaluation incident, received a communication that would change everything again. A conservation team had discovered something unexpected. "We found a small family group in the northern desert regions," the team leader explained over the video call. "We ran genetic analysis on samples from their territory. Director Martinez, some of these individuals share genetic markers with your. They might be Ember's extended family." Felt his heart skip a beat. "Are you certain?" "The probability is high. The poachers who captured Ember hit this region. It's likely these are survivors from the same clan." Immediately called a meeting with and the senior staff. The question before them was enormous and complicated. Ember had been in captivity for over a year. She had formed deep bonds with humans and adjusted to life in the habitat. Could she survive being released back into the wild? Would the wild family group accept her? What were the risks? "The decision should be Ember's," said firmly. "We give her the choice. We create a reintegration site where she can interact with the wild through barriers first. If she shows interest, if they accept her, we proceed slowly and carefully. If she chooses to stay, we respect that too." The council debated for 3 days before approving his proposal. It would be expensive, logistically complex, and potentially dangerous. But the opportunity to return her to the wild, especially to her own family, was too important to ignore. 2 weeks later, traveled to for the first time. The journey took 5 days, and Ember traveled in a specially designed transport that kept her comfortable and calm. Stayed with her the entire trip, sleeping in a small room attached to her compartment, maintaining their daily routines as much as possible. When they arrived experienced his first moments on a planet's surface in months. The heat hit him like a physical force, dry and intense. The gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, making every movement feel heavier. The sky was a deep orange color, and 3 moons were visible even during the day. The reintegration site was located in the northern desert, a protected reserve that stretched for hundreds of miles. The conservation team had built a temporary habitat for Ember adjacent to territory used by the wild family group. It was large, allowing her to move freely, but separated from the wilderness by transparent barriers that would let her see and communicate with wild without immediate physical contact. Helped settle Ember into the temporary habitat. She was restless, her spines vibrating with excitement or nervousness, he couldn't tell which. Her nostrils flared as she scented the desert air, something she hadn't experienced since she was captured. "How are you feeling, girl?" asked, running his hand along her armored side. Ember's response was a complex series of vibrations that interpreted as curiosity mixed with anxiety. She was in unfamiliar territory, but some deep instinct recognized it as home. The conservation team set up monitoring equipment while established a camp. For the first 3 days, there was no sign of the wild. Ember spent her time exploring every inch of the temporary habitat, climbing the rocks, digging in the sand, and basking under the real sun instead of artificial heat lamps. On the 4th morning, woke to an unfamiliar sound. He rushed outside to find Ember standing at the barrier, her entire body rigid with attention. Her spines were vibrating at frequencies had never heard before, complex and musical. And from the desert beyond, other voices answered. 3 approached slowly from the dunes. They were slightly smaller than Ember, their scales ranging from deep red to golden orange. They moved cautiously, clearly aware of the barriers and the strange structures humans had built. watched from a distance, barely breathing. This was the moment that would determine everything. The Wild stopped about 20 feet from the barrier. Their spines created questioning tones, asking who Ember was, what she was doing here. Ember responded with her own vibrations and heard something in the exchange that made his chest tighten with emotion. Recognition. The conversation between Ember and the Wild continued for over an hour. Recorded everything, knowing this was unprecedented scientific data, but mostly he just watched, witnessing something beautiful and profound. Over the following weeks, the Wild family group visited daily. They would approach the barrier and communicate with Ember, their spine conversations becoming longer and more complex. Sometimes they would bring food and leave it near the barrier, an offering or perhaps a test. Ember responded with increasing excitement. She would pace the barrier after the Wild left, her body language restless and yearning. She still greeted warmly when he entered the habitat, still responded to their communication routines, but her attention was increasingly focused beyond the barriers. She wants to go home, told during one of their regular video conferences. I can see it in everything she does. Are you prepared for that outcome? Asked gently. Was quiet for a moment. He thought about the past year, all the hours spent building trust, all the small victories and terrifying moments. Ember had become more than a subject or even a friend. She represented everything believed about the capacity for healing and trust. Yes, he said finally. This was always the goal, wasn't it? To help her heal. If healing means returning to her family, then that's what should happen. The reintegration team developed a careful protocol. They would open one section of the barrier for limited periods, allowing Ember to venture into the Wild territory while maintaining the option to return to the safety of the habitat. It would be entirely her choice. The day they implemented the protocol, stood beside the barrier control panel with his hand trembling slightly. Ember waited on the other side, her attention fixed on the desert beyond, where the Wild family group had been visible earlier that morning. Press the button. A section of the barrier retracted with a soft hum. Ember didn't move immediately. She looked back at, her amber eyes meeting his. Her spines created a sound he had learned to recognize as the frequency she used when seeking reassurance. Walked to the opening and placed his hand on her armored chest one more time, feeling her 3 hearts beating steadily. It's okay, he said quietly. You can go, you can come back anytime you want, but you can go. Ember pressed her massive head against his chest, a gesture of affection they had shared countless times. Her spines hummed softly and felt tears stinging his eyes. Then she turned and walked out into the desert. The Wild appeared from behind a dune, moving toward her slowly. Ember approached them, her movements cautious but eager. They circled each other, spines creating complex harmonies that echoed across the sand. One of the Wild, the largest of the group, approached Ember closely. Their spines touched, vibrating together in a resonance so pure it made his chest ache. This was family recognizing family. The Wild surrounded Ember, touching her, welcoming her, creating a chorus of sound that was unlike anything had ever heard. It was joy and recognition and homecoming all at once. Ember looked back at one more time. Even from a distance, he could read her body language. Gratitude, farewell, freedom. Then she walked away with her family, disappearing over the dunes into the vast desert that was her true home. Stood at the barrier for a long time, watching the empty horizon. His team approached cautiously, unsure what to say. Are you all right, Director? Asked quietly. Wiped his eyes and smiled. I'm perfect. That's exactly how it was supposed to end. The monitoring equipment tracked Ember for weeks afterward. She integrated fully into the Wild family group, learning to hunt, establishing territory, living the life she was meant to live. The wounds from her trauma didn't disappear, but they healed in ways that captivity never could have achieved. Returned to the Galactic Preserve Station 3 months later. The work continued with new cases, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that understanding and empathy could bridge any gap. The station's reputation grew. Facilities across the galaxy adopted its protocols. The Galactic Wildlife Conservation Council established new standards based on his work. Slowly, the way intelligent species approached wildlife management began to change. In his office, kept a recording of Ember's spine vibrations, the complex language they had built together over months of patient work. Sometimes, Late at night, after a difficult day, he would play it back and remember. He remembered a terrified creature in a barren habitat, too traumatized to trust, too hurt to hope. He remembered the slow process of building communication, one frequency at a time. He remembered the moment she chose not to attack when he was vulnerable, the moment that proved trust was real. He remembered her walking into the desert, free and whole, surrounded by family. And he remembered the most important lesson he had learned, the one he taught every new handler who joined the program. The creatures they worked with weren't specimens or subjects or problems to be solved. They were individuals with emotions, intelligence, and the capacity for trust. All they needed was someone foolish enough to believe in them. Across the galaxy, the human approach to wildlife rehabilitation became the new standard. Patience over force, understanding over dominance, empathy over control. And on a desert planet called, a named Ember lived free under 3 moons, carrying with her the memory of a human who saw past her anger to the pain underneath, who chose trust when everyone else chose fear, who proved that sometimes the most foolish choice was actually the one. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from a human zookeeper and a traumatized predator. The strongest bonds weren't built on power or control. They were built on respect, patience, and the courage to reach across the vast distances between species and say, "I see you. I understand. You are not alone." That lesson would change the galaxy forever, one relationship at a time, one act of foolish bravery at a time, one choice to trust instead of fear. And it all started with a human who was willing to sit quietly outside a barrier and wait for a terrified creature to believe that safety was possible again. The message was clear. The galaxy had underestimated humans and what they could accomplish through empathy and understanding. And in a habitat on the Galactic Preserve Station, a named Ember slept peacefully, knowing that someone in the vast, strange universe actually cared about her. Placed his hand on the creature's armored side, feeling the warmth of its body and the subtle vibrations of its breathing. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." In the observation room, watched this scene with satisfaction, stood beside her, silent for once. "The human was right," said, "trust is more powerful than force." Nodded slowly. "I did not believe it was possible. I thought he would die in that habitat. Instead, he has achieved what no one else could." On screens throughout the station, other staff members watched the impossible friendship that was changing everything they thought they knew about working with dangerous creatures. And in the habitat, a human and a sat together in peaceful companionship, proof that understanding could bridge even the widest gaps. "Maybe," agreed, "but it's gotten us this far." "Very well," said, "you have permission to proceed, but Martinez, if you die in that habitat, I will be very disappointed in you." Smiled, "I'll do my best to avoid that, Director." The trust of a creature that every other species in the galaxy had given up on. Tomorrow, he would prove that sometimes the foolish choice was the right one.